All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining Speaking of Clinical today. I can't believe it's already episode 8. I also can't believe that it's already March in a few days. Anyhow, so this is Christian Burns here. It's just going to be myself today. I appreciate, actually, in looking at a lot of the attendees, it looks like we have a lot of recurring people that are attending every single week. So I hope that everybody has been enjoying our sessions, and actually we're already kind of looking up our next sessions come, really end of March, April timeframe. So if anyone has any suggestions on things that you want us to talk about, shoot them over. And we're going to kind of make some changes too, where we would like to get more interviews and with potential people based on relevant topics that are the KOLs within that particular area. So we're hoping to continue to kind of improve the whole logic in these, and most importantly, we hope these are helpful for everybody. So I know you can't see me today. We've been trying to figure out some kinks with this system, so I do apologize on that. But overall, thanks for joining today. So basically, the overall topic is, can patients find your site? And I kind of broke it down into 3 different segments that we can review within the next 29 minutes. And one of those segments is I'd like to go into really a site overall digital presence. The second one I'd like to review would be really just the background in text messaging when it comes to the site, of course. How are people texting these days? What would be considered a successful text strategy, and what might not be a successful text strategy. And then the third component would be patient travel. Patient travel, something that we've seen increase substantially based on the amount of sponsors and CROs that are beginning to accept almost patient travel for just about every study. So we're going to kind of dive into that and talk about some consistent expenses we've seen approved. And then also for tougher trials, how do we get potentially higher expenses approved when it comes to potentially an individual patient circumstance. So, but I would like to incorporate everybody as much as possible. I want to hear kind of what everybody else does, and maybe if they do anything differently from what we've seen, of course. So I know that I like to use that raise your hand feature. So if everybody looks at their screen, you're going to see a kind of that white hand right in the box. So when I ask for people to show their hands, if you want to go ahead and click that white hand, that would be helpful, so we can see how many people are potentially doing some of the strategies I'm talking about, or may not be doing the strategies I'm talking about. So let's go into the weeds a bit when it comes to digital strategy. So I think it's without question that hopefully every single site has a website these days. Hopefully we're past the conversations and presentations when it comes for whether you should have a website or not. But we kind of see the website as the overall quarterback of your entire digital presence. So how you're integrating your social strategy, how you're integrating your ads. Essentially, the website should be your key to route all potential interest for any patients, caregivers, sponsors, CROs, whoever that may be that's looking up some information on you. I think it's also without question that we've talked about that you need to update your website with fresh content with things like blogging, connecting your website to your social media pages, so your Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, etc. So what would be the weeds then? What would be kind of the next step? Is one of the items that I was hoping to kind of review in a little bit of detail here is making sure when it comes to just your updating of content, is making sure that you're updating your studies on a regular basis. So as you're enrolling for trials today, or you're planning to enroll for a study within the next month or 2, add the trial to your website and try to add any generic information that may be relevant to your study. And of course, tag a landing page with that particular indication. Some of this may be basic, but I'm going to go over some kind of brief questions we've seen make a difference, I think, in 2018 with some of those questions that you definitely need to be asking and capturing within that landing page. One of those questions would be, Ask when is the best time to schedule a call. Again, maybe that's pre-2018, but I know a lot of people still don't seem to be doing that. Preferred method of communication, I did say I'm going to jump into texting as its own feature, but please make sure you are incorporating the fact that texting is an option in how you're communicating with any patients and caregivers. Some people, based on any kind of busy schedule, especially middle class person or family that may be considering participation in the clinical trial, texting is actually potentially a much better feature for some of them with a busier work schedule to accommodate for a potential time to get them in the office for pre-screening or do a phone screen, of course. So make sure you're giving them the option, text, call, email, and then of course the preferred time that you're going to be able to chat with them. A big one that we've seen consistently is there's a lot of sites out there that are a little bit more flexible in their hours. So you might be open Monday to Thursday, for instance. You might be doing 10-hour, 10-hour days. So you might be talking, opening at 6, opening at 7, of course, and then going all the way to closing around 8 o'clock at night. I have always seen this very beneficial because you want those adjusted hours and thinking of the convenience of, kind of that working class, typical routine that people are on with more of that 9-to-5 job. So if you do have hours that are more of that Monday through Thursday, ask the patient if they're wanting to come in early at 6 to 7 o'clock. Sometimes people forget that they're not going to jump out right away with the hours of operation, because I can know for myself, I try to do all my doctor's appointments first thing in the morning, so I'm hopefully missing as little as work as possible. And I know that if I get there first, I'm probably not going to have to wait. And regardless of whether you're a clinical research facility or you're a medical facility, I think that stigma is going to take a long time to break down before patients know that we're actually improving overall as a medical industry with hopefully having patients wait so long. But that is still a stigma that is, of course, out there. So make sure you're having them almost select the preferred wait time right there on a potential landing page. Taking a couple steps back here, just make sure that you're keeping your brand consistent when it comes to your website and all of your social pages. Just a couple different tips and tricks when it comes to how to go about ensuring that you're doing that. Make sure you're getting images that are always going to be consistent with your overall brand. I would try to stay away from any kind of pixelated images. Don't use any pictures of doctors or chemicals or test tubes or whatever that may be. Unfortunately, I still see a lot of sites trying to put images like that up on their website or their social media pages. That is not going to help when you're trying to break down the stigma of research for a patient who's never been into a trial before. So I would think about more pictures, videos, images that are going to be consistent with your overall with your overall presence and your therapeutic focus, and more informational about clinical trials and tips and tricks for someone getting in their first clinical study. Some testimonials. That this is a hugely successful tactic that we've seen at the site level, where do a video of a patient if you have the luxury of being able to do that, but I probably shouldn't even say the luxury because it's so easy to even take a Facebook video or take a video from your iPhone these days and put it on something like Facebook. But talk to a patient that's had a great experience. Hey, can we do a testimonial on you? Can you go on Google and write a review? We'd love to, if you could give us 5 stars, put a comment there about your experience. Of course, be compliant with the trial. Don't put anything about the specific study when you go ahead and leave that experience. But you almost want to phrase it to the patient that we want other people to have the same experience that you did. And obviously having them hear your story will be powerful for us and for them to hopefully see those same accommodations, benefits, whatever the scenario may be, that we want to push across. So I did realize I didn't indicate something when I just said that strategy, which a lot of sites do forget on a consistent basis. But it is very easy to verify your business through Google. You could literally go into the Google bar and put in, how do I verify my business? and there's a 5-step process that shows up. I would strongly encourage you to do that, because when you can verify your business, you're going to be able to be integrated within Google Maps, and hence the topic of this conversation today, can patients find your site? Well, I don't know about a lot of other people on the call, but I am definitely going and searching for a business before I go there to see exactly where they may be at. And Google Maps becomes my best friend when I go ahead and do that. So I know some sites that are in strip malls, some sites that are maybe behind a big bank and they have a small sign. Whatever those means may be, I would make sure that not only are you putting the tips and tricks on your website for how to find your facility, but also take that into consideration that when you verify your business through Google, a lot of people are going to be searching for you and almost getting the directions right through their phone when they're coming to visit your site. So I would strongly encourage you to take that into consideration when you think of your overall digital presence. Let's see, we've kind of already covered a few things that pretty quickly here. So I would consider also adding that feature, so the Google Maps feature to your website if you have the luxury. I know some sites, we do that. It potentially could be good enough though just to have it through Google when you go ahead and search your site name. But what I would say is make sure you add it to the landing pages that you have. So when we're doing a study specific landing page, we're going to go ahead and integrate the Google Map essentially right there, so the patient has an idea of where you may be before they might potentially no call, no show if they realize that you're too far. So a big thing to take in consideration. So I'm going to pause there because I feel like I've already been talking too much. How many people on the line, and again, go ahead and click that white hand there that says raised hand. How many people on the call are verifying their site business in Google? If you could just click that hand, I'd be curious to understand how many people do it, because I don't see a lot of sites doing that on a consistent basis. All right, out of the number of people that are on the call, I hope we have a better turnout than that. So I'm just going to repeat it one more time. How many people on the call already have their website for their research site verified through Google as a business? If you could go ahead and click that hand, that would be very helpful just to see how many people are already doing that. And also, as I'm jumping through, any questions that you have based on the process, feel free to include that within the box there that says questions. I try not to do anything lecture style. I like it better when there's questions, and I can just review those specific things as we kind of go along here, since this is a broad topic. All right, so I see a few hands, which means there's not a lot of people that do it. Okay, so that's good. Again, go into the search bar for Google. It's a 5-step process. How do I verify my site business? Very easy to do. Highly recommend it. You should potentially see a large turnout. So let's switch the script a little bit. We started to talk about images that we would advise to keep consistent. Stay away from doctor images. Stay away from chemicals. Stay away from, I'm not a huge fan of the pixelated or even stock images when it comes to like a physician and a nurse, kind of slapping hands, or sitting in a waiting room or whatever it may be. I would encourage you to go with more consistent brands related to your logo. Try to stick with a consistent color scheme. Use consistent content when you're talking about your site or how you're introducing certain things. And when you think about how to keep your content and images consistent, I know not everybody at the site level has the luxury of outsourcing to a marketing agency that's really going to control their marketing presence. So if you don't have that luxury, think a little bit less. I mean, there's a lot of social media platforms out there. I know it can be overwhelming. It can even be overwhelming to me at times when I think of what I'm actually pushing out on a personal level. But on a business level, the most known platforms are still the most relevant as far as how many patients would be coming through that are actually getting into trials. Facebook and Twitter being two of those functions. So I would I would encourage you to not think that you have to be on every single platform. Try to focus on, let's say 2 platforms at one time. How do I have a consistent presence, with 2 of those platforms? And when you think about the frequency, which is always a big question, and I know there's a lot of mixed signals out there, but to me, I love the term, the 2-word term called polite pestering. And essentially, what I'm referencing there is make sure your strategy and the content that you're pushing out is going to be diversified. I don't see too many sites still doing this these days, but if your every other post every single day is a new study you're enrolling and you're continuing to promote studies, there's a good chance that patients are probably going to be scared to come to your site instead of actually getting into trials and wanting to be, wanting more information. So I would post daily if you have the luxury. If you don't, go twice a week. And with those posts, think of posting a trial here and there. Post any kind of new staffing additions, relevant press on the therapeutic areas you conduct trials in, any positive press, upcoming events. You might be sharing a local business that's doing some sort of charity that's relevant to the therapeutic area. And that business, of course, sees you sharing that. They'll hopefully increase the exposure for things they'll push out on your end. But think of articles that are going to break down the stigma. I always really liked videos because there's a lot of them in YouTube that you can connect that are really informational on just how to get in a clinical trial. So if you can't find that great article to post, think how do I post something that's probably going to be a video of really just reviewing the basics of clinical trials, or what is it like to get in a clinical trial, the 10 tips and tricks of being in a study, and so forth. So testimonials is always going to be huge. I kind of stressed that earlier. We just have always seen that be a huge way to increase exposure when people are able to relate to others that may have gone through a similar experience. So anytime you have the luxury, whether it's through content or whether it's through your a video that you're doing, would strongly encourage to do that. And how can you get videos? Do a day, 1 day per month, where maybe you have one study coordinator or someone in the office that's able to capture 3 different testimonials from patients that are in trials that are having an overall good experience. Again, think about the compliance side. Make sure that they understand. Don't talk about anything related to the trial and something like that. But you can talk about the overall generic experience, of course. Going to shift just a little bit to newsletters. It's not necessarily a part of the overall topic here, but when you think of your remarketing strategy for patients that are already in your patient database, I would strongly encourage everybody to ensure that you have a newsletter. It doesn't, monthly is perfect. You don't have to send it out very frequent. I have an example of a newsletter if anyone is interested on the phone of a site that is approved, giving this newsletter out, but essentially structure it in the manner of, again, the same things that we're talking about when it comes to your website and social presence. So if you're doing NASH trials, you might have an article as the centerpiece, how to maintain a healthy liver. You're always going to most likely have your current enrolling studies on the right side. Of course, integrate your social media pages on the newsletter. But your newsletter is typically always going to be connected to a landing page. You're going to be able to track the number of clicks, the number of people that have submitted interest, et cetera, et cetera. But think that your newsletter, focus on your organization. You might have a visual of your site, something exciting going on your site, or of course some press relevant to the overall indication. If anyone needs any examples, again, I'd be more than happy to send this over. Text messaging. So I'm going to jump into text messaging here. How many people on the line are text messaging with patients? Hopefully everybody's saying yes now. I think we're past the point of whether we should be texting patients or not. But if everybody could click that white hand again, and let me know if you are texting patients on a regular basis when it comes to pushing out clinical trials. Again, it's that hand that's about in the middle of the screen. It says raised hand. All right, great. Looks like we got a few people that are texting. So I think a common question is not whether we should be texting or not. It should be, what should the text say and do? And I would recommend you stay brief and straight to the point. If anyone needs to reach out to me for that newsletter example, I also have some mass text examples for you where I have 5 different copies of what a potential text message may look like, and also the pros and cons to texting patients. Since this session is not all about texting, I'm not going to go into all the pros and cons on this sheet here, but I have seen this be very valuable when it comes to some of the questions that come up. So what would be one example? X research center is seeking males for a low testosterone clinical research study. It must be between the ages of 18 and 65. If you're interested in participating, please call our team at blank, 555-555 if you want to call it. Enrollment is closing soon. So you list your age, you list the indication, be brief as possible. You'd probably want more people calling in and asking questions instead of limiting someone who may not qualify or who may not think they qualify just based on the information that you're pushing out. But as you know, maybe they qualify in a month from now. Just give you one more example out of the several that I have here. Our OAB study is closing on August 4th. If you're interested in participating in the overactive bladder clinical study at X Clinical Research, please text us the best time and date to call to see if you qualify. If you are no longer interested, please text STOP. So again, short, brief, right to the point. There's 2 examples. Another thing I would make sure that you might also include there is add the link to the landing page if you have one that's relevant to that study, because if someone doesn't text you back, maybe they end up going to the landing page and submitting their information that way, which is huge. So, I have a question that came in, so I'm going to go ahead and, as I alluded to, I'm going to address those as they come. So the first question is, are newsletters beneficial? I started to expand upon that. I've always been a true believer of a diversified marketing strategy. So I don't think any one strategy is going to, give you the goal of getting a whole bunch of additional patients through the door. But I think the diversified strategy and the continued, your continued ability to push out relevant content is going to increase the chances that a patient or a caregiver that may already be in your database to not forget about your research site. Or a patient may have gotten into a trial for osteoarthritis and they think that you just do OA and that's how they thought of you in the past, but you just got a low back pain study and they now may be a great fit for that opportunity. So I would, think about how you're pushing out your overall capabilities as an organization, and also your clinical trials in as many opportunities as possible. But you're clearly not going to email blast patients every time you have a new study that comes about. So newsletter is a great opportunity to consolidate and bring everything together, which is going to allow things to be successful. All right, I have another question here. Nope, that's just requesting the newsletter and text messages. Okay, so we'll move on to patient travel because I know we already only have a couple minutes left. Patient travel at the site side is something that it's very hard to track how many additional patients are going to actually randomize into a trial just because of travel. I think it's a bit subjective. However, even at the owned sites that our organizations have, since implementing travel, we've actually doubled enrollment. And I was actually looking at some data prior to this call to get some ammo here. But for instance, one of the smallest sites that we have, one from 17 patients um, to 31 patients in the same span of, what is this, a 2-week span. And that was since we had implemented travel, which was not incorporated originally. Couple quick points on travel these days. I think we're past the point of sponsors knowing whether they should approve it or not. With Uber and Lyft that are relevant and prevalent to just about many geographic locations, there's usually an opportunity where someone can get into a trial through one of those forms of transportation. And I don't know about if anyone on the call is from a large metropolitan area, but when you're trying to drive your car into the city and you have to find the parking garage, you have to pay to park, then you have to walk 2 streets over to the building, and we can also throw in there that maybe it's 0 degrees, which tends to be sometimes Boston. Getting in an Uber and showing right up at the door, saving time, having the accommodations provided to you is going to be a huge advantage for anybody to take into consideration. So how do you get the sponsor to approve it? Just make sure you separate it in the budget, based on the patient reimbursements, and have a line allocated to patient travel. I always think it's important to tell the sponsor that we may not need this based on our anticipated number of patients that we need to enroll. However, we'd like to have it in here for any patients that we would see that will definitely need it based on the circumstances. Try to get $100 per visit. It might beat you down to $50. We have seen studies over $100. Typically, if it's over $100, it's going to be more of your tougher to recruit trial, where we probably need to have a little bit larger of a geographic location that we're looking for patients. And if a sponsor says, you know what, I don't want to approve that, it's outside of our budget, I would still bring it to their attention on an individual basis when it comes to a patient that is going to be outside that $50 Uber ride. So we actually had a recent scenario, since one of our sites is down on the south coast of Massachusetts. A patient had called in for a trial that's pretty challenging. They're from, I'll just make it brief and say inside Boston. It's about an hour south, could be longer based on traffic. But when we looked at the potential ride for the patient, it's going to be probably a $200 Uber ride. So we brought that particular circumstance to the sponsor, and they did approve it. So we are in the process of getting that officially approved, but they did give us the green light. And essentially for that particular patient, we stressed the importance of ensuring that retention was one of those major issues that we wanted to ensure that patient had the easiest experience as possible, since there were some restrictions to them potentially even driving down there in the first place. So in a brief sense, $50 to $100 is what we see consistent, but just like anything in your budget, I'd shoot for $100. Let the sponsor know that we just like to have this in place as needed, and you may go over, and let the sponsor know, do you want us to bring that to your attention if we're anticipating something where the expense is going to be higher than that? Usually that's going to be something that they're going to strongly consider, since a lot of studies are hard these days. Since we only have 1 minute left, I feel like I kind of talked a lot. What questions does anyone have in patient travel, your digital presence, texting, newsletters? We kind of briefly highlighted on a few of them. How many people are incorporating travel into their budgets? If anyone can raise their hand that they've gotten higher than $100, that would be helpful for others on the phone to see if that's consistent for what we have seen. If you want to hit that white hand again, that would be helpful. Okay, a few people. Anybody? I would imagine $100, $50 to $100 may be consistent for anyone. And if anybody needs any guidance on how to go about putting that into the budget, let us know. But even if it doesn't come from the sponsors hero initially, I would make sure you add that line item, as again, we're seeing that be a huge thing to take into consideration. Well, thanks everybody for joining the call today. I know I covered kind of a lot in a short period of time. I will go ahead and send out the examples that I talked about to Heather, who put that in the message here. If anyone has any other questions, reach out to me directly. Be happy to answer them. Christian@clin-edge.com. And you can also go right through, speaking of clinical, that Simone has put out here for you guys, which will capture also your information as well. But thanks again, everybody, and have a great rest of your Tuesday.